Hello, welcome to the Sandile Tukani University, the School of Everything and More, the one program built to allow robust dialogue, learning, unlearning, and unparalleled growth. This is where we unveil the hidden, question the dominant narratives, and always seek to uplift each other as we go. Welcome, and we hope you grow with us, and above all, enjoy.
Class 1, the naming conventions of indigenous South African languages. We apply a lot of methods when we choose names. Today I'm going to look at one or two. The addition of prefixes and suffixes that, change adjectives, nouns, verbs into names. The first one is where we add the suffix "so" in front of certain words, and therefore we relate those words with a person. I'll give you an example. So Magwaza. Magwaza is someone who's in charge of cutting things. Gwaza means to cut. It could mean a lot of different things, but someone who's in charge of cutting things, and therefore the lord of such behavior would be called So Magwaza, the greatest cutter, or the first to be cut. It could be, applied in different contexts, but that So right there, he takes the word and puts it as a name, and it relates that name to a person of the highest level in that specific realm. So Magwaza. For example, if we talk about someone who's a secretary, we say So Siba. Siba is a quill that's used to write. You dip it in ink and then you write with it. Now, Siba is that, but So Siba, then we say Lord of the Quill, which means the master writer or the scribe, aka the secretary. So we took a word that exists on its own, and then we applied this suffix, which changes it into a naming word. So is taken from the word yise, which means father of, or man of, or master of. When you use So, it doesn't always mean gender. Sometimes it could just mean something that's, an anomaly. There's a snake, dangerous snake. You decide to hit the snake and kill it to save your life. And the snake seems not to die. A snake is a inyok, or noha, depending on which language you speak. But now, someone who's observing this snake is not dying. They would make a comment such as, hey, which means this is the lord of all other snakes, which means this is a very normal type of snake. It's not the normal snake. So it has nothing to do with gender now, but rather to describe how the situation is so abnormal. So we take a word and then we add So as a prefix. So sometimes is also used when someone is literally the father of someone else. One of the Xhosa princes was Maqoma. His first daughter was called Tashe or Tashelo. And therefore, as it is tradition, his first daughter, they swear by him, by her. In isiXhosa, you always swear by the first daughter. Even the siblings, I swear by my sister. That's our tradition. Hence we call the first daughter Umafungwa She, the one by whom we swear. Now, because that's his first daughter, he was called So Tashe. Tashe is the daughter. So means father of, and therefore Maqoma was known as So Tashe because he's literally the father of Tashe. So you see how adding the prefix So changes based on the context, but it's always used as a naming word. Another example is when we don't use So but Sa. For example, my mother would call my father Saga Sandile. I am Sandile. My father has his own name, but my mother, because he doesn't want to call him by name, he wants to respect him, then he will say father of Sandile. Therefore, Saga Sandile or Sa Sandile or So Sandile, which means Yise O Sandile or Yise Ka Sandile, father of. So then adding So or Sa in the beginning of words changes that word either based on position, as in master of something, the greatest one of something, or to express anomaly, the most normal, it's very abnormal. So and so, or to show literal family ties. as in father of. That's one naming convention. In the Sotho-Tswana languages, and including Tshivenda, in South Africa, they have the exact same pattern where they add Ra in front of words. You would know the president of South Africa, his last name is Ramaphosa, which means some time ago there was either a man called Maphosa or someone called Maphosa, and then the father of that man was called Ramaphosa. Or in Tshivenda, then Maphosa would be a specific characteristics, and therefore a man who displayed so much of the characteristics would then be called Ramaphosa, Lord of Maphosa, whatever that means. But it's literally the same naming convention as the so-called Nguni languages use. So Ra, it means father as well. You find this in other names like Ra Mukhuba, Ra Murunzi. Ra Murunzi in Tshivenda would be equal to Somthunzi in Xhosa, which means the man of shades, or the man who's the shade to other people, someone with such great impact and such great, honor that other people regard him as a resting place. Somthunzi or Ramrunzi, our resting place. So we use this naming convention where we add prefixes in front of certain words, whether they are nouns already or verbs or adjectives, etc., and then they become naming words. The same naming convention is used as a suffix sometimes, where instead of adding so in the beginning of words or ra in the beginning of words, we add se at the end or she at the end. Remember, so, se, and she are literally a shortened version of the word yise. Yise means father of. Yise means father of, or lord of, or master of. So now, remember I said Somthunzi, father of shades or master of shades. Now you can change that name and say Mthunzishe or Mthunzise. Now it means man of the shade. It means man of the shade. Now the difference between these two is very slight. Sometimes there is no difference at all. Somthunzi and Mthunzishe, the difference is very slight. Somthunzi almost elevates the person named as in our shade, the provider of shade to us. Whereas Mthunzishe would be someone who likes shade. Do you understand? So when you use se at the end, it's almost like you're relating someone to a specific behavior. This also happens when someone is too jealous. Jealousy in our language is called mona. So when someone is very jealous, we call them umonase or monashe, which means mona plus father of, someone who displays so much jealousy. A habit is, in isiXhosa, is called umkwa, but something that you've been doing for so long, we call it ndala she. Ndala means old, and she is that word, something that's related to old nature. So ndala she then is old habits. So when you start doing something new and then you go back to your old habits, we'll say ubuyele kundala she. Sometimes we use this word when something is ugly. We'll say gumbishe. Mbi means ugly, and she is just to personify the ugly person or the ugly thing or that one that's ugly. So instead of adding that so in the beginning now, which sometimes elevates a certain person into a higher position than you, you just add she at the end, which is the same prefix, same word, one as a suffix, one as a prefix. Now, but you add it as a suffix, it almost acts only to relate that specific object to a behavior and not necessarily elevating it. So mathunzi or mthunzi she both relate to someone and shade, but the first one, so, it's almost like our shade, the person who represents rest for us, and then the other one is almost like a person who just likes shade, just likes to rest. Another name would be nzoloshe and xoloshe. Nzolo means order. So Nzoloshe would be someone related to order, or someone who brings order, or someone who was born in a time of order. Xoloshe would be someone who likes peace. Xolo means peace. Xoloshe is someone who likes peace. Xolo is the man of peace. So that's the second naming convention. And then the third naming convention is where we put ma at the beginning of words. And then we normally put either a verb or a noun. Sometimes this ma represents plurality, sometimes this ma represents a behavior. For example, ma diba, which is one of the clan names of Mandela. Diba is a verb to bring together, to close a hole, a diba. So ma diba is the bringer of things together, or the one who closes gaps. Ma diba, the one who closes gaps. Whereas jola in our language means to administer. So Majola is the administrator of things, the one who administers things. And then you may also have like certain words that are based on plurality. Certain words that are based on plurality, whereas ma is not just for one thing, is for something that's in plural. Manzi, it's plurality now. So you can also use that to personify a certain thing that's in plural and link it to someone. So that's the third naming convention. The fourth naming convention, now this one relates to femininity, but not always, where we use no. No is a shortened version of Nina Wo, which means mother of. So Nina We Sipho, mother of gifts, gets shortened to No Sipho. Nina We Sisa, mother of mercy, gets shortened to No Sisa. But also sometimes it can be used for a man. No Quindla, the mother of, or the one related to, or the one in close affinity to autumn. Quindla is autumn, the person of autumn, or the person of the first fruits. So our naming conventions are dynamic like that, but we always take a stem or a root word and then overlap or stack it with prefixes and suffixes, and they help us to add verbal forms. They help us to add, meaning to the word, to expand meaning to the word, to personify the word. And this is something that we've been doing for a very long time.
Another aspect in our native naming conventions is when we use a verb, but we derive it from its verbal form. So we take the verbal stem, change it into the reciprocal form, and then change it into a noun. I'll give you an example. The verb ukwala, which means to oppose. Ukwala is to oppose. Now, when it's in its reciprocal form, it becomes ukwalana. Now, when you want to change that verbal reciprocal form into a noun, like a naming word, you use it to name something or someone, you will add a prefix, uma. It's a compound prefix that's used to name things. But in this case, it's a name based on the reciprocal form of a verb. Uma plus ukwalana, which is to oppose. Umalane. Umalane is a habit of opposing something. Even when you're being told not to do it, but you keep on opposing it. So it's umalane. The focus here is not the prefix uma, but rather the word in its reciprocal form. Another example where we take a verb and change it into a reciprocal form and then change it into a noun is the name that is used for one of the hyenas in South Africa. We call it ingawane or isandawane. Look at the suffix wane or isandawane. All that tells us is that it's in a reciprocal form. The actual stem here is the word ngao. Ngao means to follow, to pursue, to hunt. Ingawa or ngao kungawa, to hunt. Now, ngawana is a reciprocal form, and then when we change that reciprocal form into a noun, we say I ngawane. I ngawane, which means the hunting one, the persisting one, or isa ndawane, same word, just a different sound. This also occurs a lot in names, people's names. For example, you have the name Madikane, Madzigane, Dingane, Matiwane. These are names that were popular in the 17 and 1800s. For example, one of the Zulu kings was Dingane or Dingani. Now, the root here is the word dinga, which means to need, to be in want of something, to be in need of something. Now, this man was actually named based on the word to be exiled, ukudinga or ukudingiswa. Therefore, dingane would mean the one who's exiled, you see, or the child of an exile, dingane. Whereas madikane or madzikane is based on the word idike, a pool of water, therefore the one of the pools of water. So we use this when we change words into the reciprocal form and then convert it into a noun, which is a naming word.
In the case of a neighbor, in isiXhosa, a neighbor is known as ummelwane, or in other dialects, including isiZulu language, umakhelwane. It's derived from the form ukuma, to stand, ukumelana, to stand opposing each other or adjacent to each other, and therefore ummelwane, the one who stands next to or opposite you. Now, on the names or the nouns that are derived from verbs that are in the reciprocal form, besides the fact that these nouns may be prefixed with ma or any other prefix, the focus is on the suffix. The verb has to be in its reciprocal form, which means it will always end with ana, which we then change when we turn it into a noun, into ani, ane. An example is the word dinga, which means to lack, to be in need. When you change it into a noun, it becomes dingani or dingane, which means the one in need, the one lacking, or the one who's alone, the one in exile. As I said with the hyena, ngawa, to hunt, to follow, ngawane or ngawani, the one who hunts or follows. So we do have a lot of these words. A lot of them are surnames. For example, my surname Tukani, Tuka, to be shocked, startled, or astonished. Therefore, Tukani, the astonishing one, the startling one. This could be based on an incident at birth, for example, of someone who's going to be named with this name that kept people astonished or startled, and therefore the child will be named the astonishing one. Lindani, Linda means to wait, to expect, or even to be jealous of, to be suspicious of. Therefore, someone who's full of suspicion or someone who's expecting would be then called Lindani. I've heard this surname before. There are many surnames like this, Pindani, the one who's being repeated, or the repeated one. This could be because you are a second child or a third child of the same gender, and therefore the repetition. We have Nikani. Nika means to give, to gift. Therefore, Nikani would be the gift or the one who gives a lot. So this happens. It's one of our naming conventions where we derived nouns or naming words based on a verb that is in its reciprocal form. Now, the other naming convention is that we add this compound prefix ma, which a lot of the times acts as a collective noun. Ma katini, ma, luputu. Uputu means to eat porridge, to eat the loose porridge. And therefore, ma luputu is the eater of the loose porridge. It's a name, it can be a nickname, it could be whatever. But we change it from luputu, which is a verb, into a noun by adding the compound prefix ma luputu. It is not gender specific in this sense, just as a compound naming prefix. You have it as Matiwane, Matikizela, which is a surname of the late Winnie Matikizela. Makatini, which is a clan name of the Kulu people. You have it as Mandela. Mandela, whom is called Nelson Mandela by most people. No, it's Mandela. It's not feminine. It's just a naming word. Ndela is actually the stem for a word which means to take root. Ukwendela or ukondela, to take root, to go deep into something. Therefore, Mandela is the one who takes root when he does something. For example, when you take when a nail, when you get pierced by a nail, we'll say iskongwane sendela enyameni, which means the nail took root in your flesh. So then the surname Mandela means the one who takes root, the one who establishes strongly. This is the surname of Nelson Mandela. Also, the other clan name of his, Madiba, is taken from the word diba, which means to bring together. For example, there's a hole full of nothing. It's an empty hole. To close it, we'll say diba lomnqonya, fill up this hole. Therefore, diba means to close holes, but also to bring things together. as in closing, gaps and all that. So Madiba then means the bringer of things together. So Mandela and Madiba, in essence, are names derived from verbs, ondela, which means to take root, and diba, which means to feel or bring together. They are formed by adding the collective compound prefix ma, and therefore Mandela, the one who takes root or who causes things to take root, who establishes things, and Madiba, the one who brings things together. So this is how we use words and play around words, verbs, noun, adverbial particles, interjectional particles. We play around this to bring about a new state or change it to a different, part of speech. Now, the ma prefix sometimes acts as, in a plural form, purely in a plural form. For example, igun is one little ball, igun, one ball. Someone with round eyes can be called magun because their eyes are so round, they like balls. Therefore, magun, the balls, or the person with eyes like balls. It's a plural form, you see. Magun is a plural form. Sometimes we use literal things like water, which is a collective noun. Manzi, it's plural, it's collective by its nature. So sometimes these words that start with the prefix ma are plural words in pure sense, in the pure sense of the word. They are plural, and we use them as a name in their plural form. Now, the other way that we name using the prefix ma is purely in a feminine way. Now, this happens a lot when either you're married to a family, when you take the last name of that family. Let's say you're married to a Mkhize man. Now you're a woman, you're taking the last name Mkhize, therefore you will be a ma plus the surname Ma Mkhize. So this is now a feminine form of whatever word. This also happens in the Xhosa culture, where it's no longer a class name but rather a clan name. So you're married to the Mfene clan. No. In the Xhosa culture, you don't change your clan. If you're a female of a clan, you take the name of the clan, but you add the ma prefix. So the ma prefix then exists, in the sense of just naming a naming word as a compound prefix, as a naming word. It exists in the sense of as a prefix in the plural form or as a prefix in the feminine form. Sometimes when we name people, we take things and just use them as plurals, but in this case, it could be any kind of plural. Zigodlo, for example. One word is zigodlo, which is the horns of an animal. Now, zigodlo is plural form, the horns of an animal. So you can take anything, any word, and change it into a noun. Sometimes you use the word as a singular, skodlo, because it's already a noun. But then if the word is a verb, you change the form of the verb. For example, lwa means to fight. But now if you are changing the form of the verb into a noun as a naming word, you will put a prefix or a suffix. Isilwi or isilwa, the fighter, you see, or ulwayo, the fighter. So you just change by prefix or suffix. So basically, this is how our culture operates. We manipulate words by changing their prefixes, their suffixes, their verbal form, or their tense, or their structure, whether they are singular or plural. We manipulate these words like this to add meaning to them. But most importantly, the word has to be in a noun form, of course, because a noun is a word that's used for naming things. Therefore, we take these words. If it's a verb, we change it into a noun. We can change it into a simple form, or a primary form, or a secondary form. All the different forms of verbs. It could be the static form, it could be the causative, it could be the reciprocal, all the different forms. But basically, we manipulate these different parts of speech, and it has to be a noun. It could be singular, it could be plural, depending on what characteristics we want the name to imply. And we take that name, we give it to a person as a personal name, or we name something, but it has to stay a noun. That's the most important aspect of our naming conventions. So this is going to be the conclusion of this lesson. We may do another series focusing on this. We may do a follow-up on this, but for now we end here. Thank you.